Out in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, there's an archipelago, scattered islands born of volcanic fire, shaped by hardship. It's a nation whose story you can almost hear on the winds that cross the sea. This is the story of Cabo Verde. So here's the central question, the paradox that just hooks you right in. How does a nation that starts with almost nothing, barren rock, a tragic past, and virtually no natural resources, somehow become this incredible example of stability and hope? It doesn't seem to make sense, right? Well, to figure it out, we have to start with the land itself. You see, the story of Cabo Verde is literally written into its geology. It's a landscape of dramatic and often really unforgiving extremes. Okay, so picture this, 10 little specks of land way out in the ocean. And these are not your typical tropical paradise islands. Think of them more as floating volcanic pieces of Africa's Great Sahel Desert. They share that same dry, arid soul. But here's the thing. This archipelago has a total split personality. You go to the northern islands, the Barlovento, and they are windswept, almost lunar, flat and sandy. But then, you travel south to the Sotavento Islands, and the whole landscape just erupts. You get these jagged, rocky mountains that are tall enough to snag moisture from the clouds, creating these little pockets of surprising green. And this is absolutely crucial to understanding everything else. This is a nation that physically can't feed itself from its own soil. Less than 2% of the land can even be farmed. Think about that. This single, stark fact has shaped its entire history, its culture, and its destiny. So with a landscape that was so challenging, the value of these islands had to come from something else. And it did. It came from their location. A location that, tragically, put them right at the center of one of history's darkest chapters. When Portuguese navigators first arrived back in the 15th century, these islands were completely empty. But they didn't stay that way for long. They were transformed into a central, brutal hub for the slave trade, a place of unimaginable suffering that created immense wealth for the colonizers. And when that trade finally collapsed, so did the economy, which kicked off a long, hard road to independence in 1975. This is the brutal irony at the very heart of Cabo Verde's origins. Its greatest asset, its perfect position on the map, was also the source of its deepest trauma. It became this crossroads where ships, cultures, and human beings were tragically bought and sold. But out of this history of scarcity, of movement, of tragedy, a really unique identity was born. The people of Cabo Verde realized that the key to their survival wasn't just on the islands, but far, far beyond them. So if you look today, just under 500,000 people actually call the islands of Cabo Verde home. It's a small, tight-knit community. But that's only half the story. Because, and this is incredible, there are more than twice that number of Cabo Verdeans living outside the country than within it. That's not just some interesting statistic, it is the single defining reality of this nation. It's a country that is truly defined, powered, and sustained by its diaspora. This global network, it's the nation's core survival strategy. When the land itself couldn't provide, the people became the most valuable export. And this isn't a brain drain, it is a lifeline. The money sent back home from communities in New England or in Portugal or all over the world, it's not just a bonus, it's a foundational pillar of the economy, making up a staggering 1/5 of the entire national GDP. So what holds this global nation together? Well, it's a cultural concept they call morabeza, and it's so much more than just hospitality. It's this deep-seated warmth, a kind of resilient, open spirit that was forged through centuries of shared hardship. It really is the soul of the people. And this national character, this spirit of Morabeza, it didn't just shape the culture, it actually laid the foundation for the country's truly remarkable political journey. At a time when many newly independent nations were really struggling with instability, Cabo Verde made a critical choice. In the early 90s, it turned away from single-party rule and fully embraced multi-party democracy. And you know what? It has never looked back. That decision became its defining political achievement. And you don't have to take my word for it. The results just speak for themselves. I mean, look at these rankings. Consistently near the very top in all of Africa for democracy, for freedom of the press, and for low levels of corruption. By pretty much any objective measure, this is one of the best-governed nations on the continent. And that kind of success, it gets noticed on the world stage. It's become a model, a reference point for progress. So when a world leader like Barack Obama calls this small collection of islands a real success story, that's more than just praise. It's an acknowledgement of a path very well chosen. Okay, so you have a stable democracy. That's huge. But how do you build a modern economy on volcanic rock with no oil, no minerals, and basically no farmland? The answer, in a word, is ingenuity. You pivot hard. You build an economy based not on what you can pull from the ground, but on what you can offer the world. A massive 70% of the economy is based on services, especially tourism, which turns the country's unique location and its unique culture into its number one asset. And the strategy for the future is this two-part plan, and it's actually brilliant. First, you take your greatest intangible asset, that Morabeza and the stunning landscape, and you turn it into a world-class tourism industry. And second, you take what was always a challenge, the constant sun and wind, and you turn it into a solution by investing heavily in renewable energy to power a sustainable future. So how do you possibly summarize a story this complex? Scarcity breeding ingenuity, a global diaspora building a nation? Well, the answer is right there in the country's own national motto, Unidade, Trabalho, Progresso. Unity, to hold a global people together. Work, to overcome these immense natural challenges. And progress, to build a future that once seemed absolutely impossible. Which brings us right back to where we started, with a question. As the rest of us grapple with a future of climate change and limited resources, maybe, just maybe, the most important lessons won't come from the world's biggest superpowers. Maybe they'll come from a small archipelago that learned, long ago, how to build a nation out of nothing but resilience, ingenuity, and hope.